Let's start here. 2026 in some ways is still a long way away. In other ways, it's feeling pretty close. You were the first major state Republican to jump in with both feet, formally announce your candidacy. I think this is a good place to start. Why do you want to be Georgia's next governor?
Well, because we're the model for the nation. And I've been fortunate enough to work in this state. I worked for Johnny Isakson. I worked economic development under Nathan Deal, and I've now worked with Brian Kemp. And we're the model because of jobs and safety. You are either in the state of Georgia because you came here for a job, you stayed here for a job, you came here for college, but that's what we have, how this state has been built over the last several decades, jobs and then safety. And in this state, we focused on both of those issues. And in addition, look, I've worked for some great folks, and over the last 2 or 3 decades, we've done it because of good, traditional Georgia conservatives. We've got to keep this state red. We've got to continue to do the things that we've done to be successful over those last 2 or 3 decades. And I've worked arm in arm, side by side with Governor Kemp and others to make sure that we do it. We've got to keep doing what we're doing.
You mentioned, I think your words were good, traditional conservative. What does that look like to you?
And Georgia.
And Georgia.
Good, and Georgia.
We're talking about a Georgia election. I hope that goes without saying. When you talk about a good, traditional conservative, what does that mean to you?
Jobs and safety. Literally, that if you look at how our state's been built over the last several decades, you can go back to the civil rights movement. The public sector and the private sector comes together to solve problems. And in this state, we don't care where you live, where you're from, what your race is, your gender, your religion. We think you deserve to be safe. And we focus those resources. If you go back again, I mentioned Senator Isakson and Governor Deal and Governor Kemp. Those are the principles that really drove them. Folks that focused on business. What kind of an environment are we creating in this state that's welcoming? There is a reason that we're the top state in the nation in which to do business. There's a reason we become the 8th largest state in the nation. This is where people want to be. They know they can build a business, they can raise their family, it's a great environment, but we focus on the basics. And that's what I think is critically important that has created the success of this state. And why in the world would we change? But you can't just run as an R in this state anymore and win. You've got to be able to appeal to a group of people, again, that care about jobs, safety, they want good educational opportunities. And that's what I've done throughout my career in working in this state, is making sure that we focus on the basics. We do it in a way that makes sense, in a good Georgia traditional conservative way.
You're the first major state Republican to formally announce campaign here, but there are others in the state who are widely rumored to be, at the very least, closely eyeing a run for the governor's mansion. 2 major players are Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Both have voiced the possibility of entering the race. What sets you apart from them?
Well, I have a record of being a true Georgia conservative. Look at what I have done. Again, working in Washington for Senator Isakson, bringing over 84,000 jobs to this state, billions of dollars worth of investment as the Commissioner of Economic Development, seeing the transformative nature of a job. What happens when somebody comes in, transforms a family, transforms a community, transforms our state. And then again, what government is supposed to do is to keep people safe. I am very proud that we have transformed this department, the Department of Law, from a largely civil practice to a very effective and aggressive criminal practice. Domestic terrorism, human trafficking, gangs. Now we have organized retail theft, focusing on cybersecurity, focusing on the opioid crisis. Those are the issues. Those are kitchen table issues. Those are kitchen window issues that matter to the people of this state. I have a true conservative record that people can look at. Don't have to talk about what I might do, what I would do. But this is about, I believe I'm the one that can be the best governor for the state of Georgia from 2027 and beyond. Not about what other people can or can't do. It's what I think I am capable of doing.
I hear you spending a lot of time talking about kitchen table issues, things like safety, things like the economy. One thing I don't hear you talking a lot about right now are social issues, and that was a big component of a lot of what we saw on the campaign trail in 2024, issues of race and gender. If you become governor, do you see yourself spending as much time focused on those topics as some of these other kitchen table issues?
Well, look, I've got a conservative record. I'm a lifelong Catholic. I am proud that we've defended life in our state, the Life Act, some people call the Heartbeat Act. I am proud that we've stood up to protect girls, and women's sports. You want to talk about a passionate group of people. It is the parents of girls that compete in athletics in our state that get fired up when there are boys that want to compete in that type of thing.
And you're talking, I hate to interrupt, but just
Sure.
to be clear to somebody who might be picking this interview up in long form, you're talking about the ongoing legislative efforts in our state regarding transgender access to sports, correct?
And nationally. We've had the federal government, we spent the past 4 years having to sue the Biden administration because all they wanted to focus on was climate change and gender identity. The point is, I believe that every human being has dignity, value, and worth. What I worry about is when the government, some government elected official wants to mandate how we should believe about certain issues that I think are critically important to Georgians. Again, there's no issue that's more, I think, personal than the issue of abortion. There are a lot of families that are having to deal with, again, wanting to protect the girls that are competing in their families and in sports. But at the end of the day, I believe this is about jobs and safety. I believe that's how the state of Georgia has become the leader, the model of the nation, for the nation. I don't know why other states don't do it like we do. I traveled the country as Commissioner of Economic Development. Everybody asks, how do you do it? Well, if people of goodwill want to come together and do it, they will. I've now traveled the country as the Attorney General. People say, how do you get federal, state, and local law enforcement in the room like we do with our Georgia Anti-Gang Network or our Opioid Task Force, and say, how do we leverage the assets and the resources we have? Well, that's how we do it. We are different. I think it would be very foolish of us to change the direction of our state when we've been so successful.
You mentioned your travels around the country. I know that in September you took a trip to the southern border. Immigration and illegal immigration has been a challenge that in some ways has vexed both Republican and Democratic administrations in the White House. And while you were at the southern border, you said immigration is a challenge for all the states in the country. How would you address it?
Well, the number one, the duty of the federal government is the defense of the nation, and immigration is part of that. If the federal government doesn't defend the nation and immigration is a problem, and I know folks on the left, it drives them crazy to hear this, but every state does become a border state. We've seen it from gangs, human trafficking, and fentanyl. Those are all issues that we've had to deal with in this state because the border hasn't been secure. We spent 4 years suing the Biden administration, whether it was Remain in Mexico, Title 42 issues, or the administration would have violent criminals that had gone through the criminal justice system. Federal law would require them to be deported, but they didn't. So we sued to do that because that is what government's supposed to do. So again, at the end of the day, we have to deal with it in the state of Georgia. I think we now actually have an administration that has proven that they're going to focus on immigration, they're going to focus on violent criminals, and that helps what we're doing. But to help the administration, I mentioned we have the Georgia Anti-Gang Network. First time ever federal, state, and local law enforcement comes together. Well, we've created Operation Hold the Line to focus on cartels and transnational gangs, getting our prosecutors, getting our investigators, boots on the ground to focus on this issue. Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to have gang activity in their backyard. But they want to know if it is somebody's doing something. Well, we in the state of Georgia, thanks to the governor, thanks to the legislature, our office fighting it, we're doing something about it. Human trafficking is just a horrific industry that gets worse and worse the more you hear the stories when the average age of a victim is a 14 to 17-year-old girl. And the thing that keeps me up at night, fentanyl. Fentanyl's being laced in everything, from marijuana to cocaine to heroin, and it's coming across that border. So we're going to continue to focus on doing what we need to do at the state level, keep the people of our state safe, but we need the federal government to be a partner, and I believe the Trump administration is a partner in that.
You talk a lot about violent criminals, drug trafficking, human trafficking as, if I'm hearing you right, your major focus when you're looking at the issue of unlawful immigration. On the other hand, there are many people who cross the southern border unlawfully, but once they reach the United States, live a law-abiding life. They work here, they raise families here, but they're here in the country unlawfully nonetheless. How would you address those illegal immigrants?
Well, you got to secure the border. And here's the bottom line. You're either coming legally or not. Many of us had family members that came here and immigrated from somewhere else. My family came from Belgium, as a matter of fact. But look, the other thing is there is an economic development piece to immigration. But until the border is secure, Until the federal government does what it is supposed to do, we can't have a conversation about what's the number one industry in our state. Agriculture. There has to be a way that we can pair a willing employer and a willing employee together for seasonal purposes. We're educating some incredibly talented, smart students at Georgia and Georgia Tech or Georgia State or Emory, but they're graduating and we're sending them home to compete against us. That doesn't make any sense. But you're not going to be able to have those conversations until the border is secure. The election of 24 was an issues-based election. First time in modern political history, if you're a Republican, Democrat, or an independent, the top three issues were jobs and the economy, safety, and immigration. All three of those categories want the border to be secure. Then we can talk about other issues that we need to address that are economic based. But at the end of the day, we want people to come here legally. We don't want people to come here illegally, and we can't create incentives to break the law. We can't have an attractive nuisance because we have a federal government that is not doing its job. We now have, I think, a partner in the Trump administration that is saying there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And if you come here illegally, we're going to focus on making sure that that you're removed.
Georgia has changed a lot politically in the last 10 to 20 years. There was a time when we were not a battleground state. We now very much are, and you saw that in 2016 and 2020 and 2024. President Trump won our state and effectively swept the board in battleground states when it comes to the Electoral College in 2024. But as a breakdown of the actual vote, President Trump won Georgia by just about 2%. If you win the election here, if you become Georgia's governor, how do you lead a state that is still very closely politically divided?
Yeah, well, again, because I think you focus on the basics. You focus on trying to provide the people of Georgia with an opportunity to have a job, and you keep them safe. Those are the issues that people care about. We saw it in the state of Georgia. You can be a Republican, or you can be a persuadable voter. You may want Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., and you want a Brian Kemp or a Chris Carr in the state of Georgia. And we've shown that. I've been through 3 statewide races. I was on the ballot with Governor Kemp, and in 2022, in the primary 22, he and I both got 74% of the vote in a very difficult cycle. But what that tells me is the people of our state said, we like your brand of Georgia conservatism. We like your brand of leadership.
Do you see that as a different brand of conservatism than perhaps what President Trump lives out?
I see it as what our state has been and what has become. I've given you the names of some folks. If you go back a couple of decades, you can see, the Johnny Isaacsons, the Nathan Deals, and the Brian Kemps. But you can go back even to a Zell Miller, where this is what we have focused on. I mean, the Olympics were a turning point for our state. For our state, we showed the world that we were a great place to do business, we were a great place to raise a family, and we care about keeping people safe, and we care about the basics of government. That's what you want in this state. But so absolutely, Brian Kemp has been masterful in how he has governed this state. There is no doubt he is a conservative. He is a Georgia conservative. He told people in 2018 and 2022 who he was going to be, and he has been it, and he's been a fantastic governor. That's the model. Brian Kemp is the model for this state, and I am so proud to have worked shoulder to shoulder with him to help bring jobs to this state and keep folks safe.
Georgia now has a multi-billion-dollar surplus. If you win, if you take the governor's mansion, how would you like that money to be used?
Well, I think with the way the governor and the legislature have done it, fortunately, we've got great leadership, which is why we have a AAA bond rating, which is critically important for this state as relates to the projects that we have. I like what they've done. I like that we're focusing on infrastructure. I think that those long-term projects that we need. Look, we're a growing state. You got to focus on education and workforce. You got to focus on infrastructure. We have Hartsfield. We've got the ports of Savannah and Brunswick. We now have the largest roll-on, roll-off facility in Brunswick, Georgia, as it relates to cars. We've got to focus on housing and those other issues. I think the way that we've done it, and we've got to lower the tax burden as low as we possibly can to continue to attract businesses and folks to our state. So I like the way we've done it, and partnerships matter. You have to have good partnerships in the legislature. You have to have good partnerships with the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor and the leadership. That's what has separated, I think, the state of Georgia. Is we're willing to work together, public sector, private sector, but also within state government. You can have some disagreements, you can have your battles, but at the end of the day, you try to do what's best for the people of Georgia.
That's a good time. I want to ask you, we're talking in your office. We're right across the street from the state capitol. The legislative session has now made it past crossover day, past the midpoint. As the session moves into the back half of this year, what are your top priorities that still need to get done in your view?
Great. Well, we were fortunate in the amended budget, the smaller budget, we got resources to expand our human trafficking unit to Macon and to Augusta. So that's critically important. We're focusing on expanding our gang unit to Savannah. We started off in 3 cities. We're now in Atlanta, Macon, Augusta, Columbus, and we're going in Middle Georgia, but we're also trying to locate a group in Savannah as well. Doxing's a big issue. Putting police officers' information online with maybe, quote, at best, to harass police officers, at worst somebody's going to get hurt. We want to make that a crime. I think it should be a crime in the state. It's a federal crime to materially support terrorist organizations. We have domestic terrorism under our authority. I think it should be a crime in this state as well. But this is an issue that isn't necessarily the legislature, but we work with corrections and we work with some of our partners over there, and that's being able to jam cell phones in our prisons. The one thing our law enforcement tell us, if you want to stop violent crime or scams across the country, be able to jam contraband cell phones in our prisons. We've gone to D.C., we've met with DOJ, we've met with the FCC. This is an issue we're going to keep focusing on. We're working with the Department of Corrections Commissioner Tyrone Oliver on this issue because unfortunately, just recently, last week, we had 2 13-year-old boys killed in Atlanta from a hit that was ordered from one of our prisons.
From inside the prison?
From inside the prison. We had in South Georgia, tragedy as well. 88-year-old veteran that was murdered in a hit that was ordered out in one of our prisons. They got the house wrong and murdered a veteran. Not just a Georgia issue. This is an issue around the country. But it's something that we've got to be able to focus on because, and then scams, everybody's getting texts and phone calls, and unfortunately, that's also coming from our prison system. Not just a Georgia issue, national issue, but we're not going to let this issue go because I think it's critically important for public safety.
One of the other big topics in the Georgia legislature this year also relates to public safety. There's been a lot of legislative effort surrounding school safety, particularly in the wake of the awful Appalachia High School shooting in 2024. How do you propose Georgia keeps its school students safe?
Well, I think what is happening now in the legislature, the debate and the discussion and the resources the governor's put forth and the legislature have is incredible. So I would support that as well. I think when you're looking at keeping kids safe, school resource officers are critically important. Hardening the asset itself, the school itself, making sure that you've got safe doors and windows and protecting the building itself. But also, you want to have that, and I know the legislature has discussed this a little bit, you want to be able to have folks on the inside that are teachers and counselors and principals and parents and others, that when threats are made by students, that there's a conversation about what needs to be done. Those are the things we need. It is absolute tragedy to see any child that is killed and is murdered, as we saw at the school in Appalachia High School. But I commend the legislature for doing it. But it's something I think we're always going to have to continue to focus on is keeping kids safe.
School resource officers is one of the main points that a lot of people bring up when we're having this tough conversation about school safety. There were SROs on site at Appalachia High School. They're widely credited for preventing worse tragedy from happening there, but still SROs were there and still this shooting took place. Is hardening school facilities enough, or does there need to be another component to make sure kids stay safe?
And good communication. I know there was an issue of communication between different systems. That would be, and I know the legislature is dealing with that, and we would support that as well. Again, that goes back, I just mentioned about the teachers and the parents and the counselors. Good communication on these issues also matters. So that's where I would focus my resources, and again, improving that, supporting the folks that we do have on site, and then again, listening to the community. What else do we need to do as it relates to good communication to keep our kids safe?
Do you think, Democrats in the state legislature have advanced some positions that they say would in some ways restrict access to firearms in certain cases, and they see that as a component of keeping schools safe? Do you support any efforts like that?
No, I'll tell you, I don't, because here's why. Every day we focus, whether it's gangs, whatever it may be, on those that either illegally possess or illegally use or improperly use a firearm. My problem is every time somebody uses a weapon from a criminal perspective, somebody wants to take away my ability to own a firearm. And I support the right of a law-abiding citizen in this state to defend him or herself, his or her property, his or her family. I just believe it's constitutional and it's fundamental. There are other things that we can do. Also, changing the HIPAA laws to allow when we do have kids that are in counseling, if they're talking about threats, making sure that counselors can communicate with law enforcement officers, but taking away a law-abiding citizen's right to own a firearm, is not the right approach to stopping criminal activity. And there's lots of other ways. And I do think mental health is a big issue. I think that people that are mentally healthy aren't shooting schools. It's the core of poverty. It's at the core of homelessness. But this is an issue I think I'm proud of our state putting resources towards mental health issues. We deal with it on the opioid crisis. I've seen it firsthand. And that's an area I think we're all going to have to focus on. It's going to take federal, state, local, private sector, and nonprofit involvement, but I think critically important.
You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it. I want to end here. We've gotten into a lot of details. I want to zoom back out. One last question to you. At the macro level, if you're elected governor of Georgia, your vision for our state over the course of that potential term in office, what does it look like?
Well, it's going to be continuing to be a state where businesses want to start, they want to locate, they want to stay here, families want to be here, and they're going to know no matter where they live in this state, no matter who they are, they're safe.
Attorney General Chris Carr, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.